When a child gets a smartphone, pornography exposure doesn't happen if, it happens when. On average, the first exposure happens around the age of 11 or 12, although some studies show it's much younger in the Diocese of Arlington found in their diocese that the first exposure was around 6 years old. It dramatically changes how people see their family members, their mother, their sisters, their friends. Those images don't go away. They're burned into the brain forever. It affects the relationship with their future wife and is one of the leading causes of divorce. I've been working with boys for 15 years as a volunteer mentor in the community. And then also as a psychologist, I've worked with young people and their families and also people who are older who have been addicted for decades. This is the number one problem that young people face through the smartphones. It's not social media. It's not video games. Those are oftentimes the entry points and the delivery systems. But the biggest problem is pornography use. And the biggest challenge about this is no one wants to talk about it. It's a taboo subject. And hence it gets hidden and it doesn't get treated. It doesn't get addressed. There's a cycle of addiction and shame. Parents feel helpless once they find out. They feel like this can never happen to my child. In the rest of this video, I'm going to explain to you how this addiction develops and what to do about it, how to prevent it from happening in the first place. In the rest of the video, I'm going to tell you everything I've learned in 15 years of working with the casualties of digital destruction. I'll talk about the neuroscience of why it's so addictive, the four most common scenarios I see how social media and video games contribute to this, the very simple solution parents can take to prevent this from happening. And I'll also answer the most common objections parents raise when I speak about this to audiences nationally. This is going to be direct, clinical, honest. If you're a parent or know someone who's raising children, this is for you. I've been told not to make this video by someone I highly respect, but I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm willing to let my career be destroyed and to suffer personal persecution because I know how important this issue is. My name is Dr. Johan D'Souza. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've dedicated my life to helping families address the biggest challenge facing this generation. Let's start with the data. For years, young people worldwide were found to be the happiest age group. This dramatically changed in 2010. One of the three age groups went from being the happiest to being the least happy. That was the youngest age groups. The middle age group and the older age group did not change at all. There's a complete flip from the youngest being the happiest to being the least happy. That happened in 2010. What else happened in 2010? Major depressive episodes, especially for girls, skyrocketed. Hospital visits for self-harm skyrocketed. Hospitalization for suicide went dramatically up. We're talking about increases of 200, 300, sometimes 600% increases. Diagnoses of mental health disorder for U.S. undergrads increased. But these increases in mental illness didn't occur just in the U.S. They occurred all around the world, primarily in wealthy, English-speaking, white countries, particularly those which are more secular. And the striking thing about these statistics is it only affected young people. The younger you are, the worse your mental health became over time. For example, the youngest age group in one study was the most anxious, and you see that as they get older, they're less and less anxious. And this is at the same point in time that this is measured. But not everything increased. Some things plummeted. At the time that young people spent outdoors went down. Time spent with friends went down. Screen use has continued to increase since 2010. By 2015, 20% of girls are spending 40 hours a week on social media. That's a full-time job on social media alone. And by 2023, nearly half of teens report being online almost constantly. Daily entertainment screen time for teens averages at 8 hours and 39 minutes a day. That is the average daily entertainment screen time, not including screen time spent in school, which in many cases is hours and hours. So what happened in 2010? Because keep in mind, this is not a gradual change. This was an inflection point at 2010. It's like increases of screen use and increased mental illness. In 2010 is when the smartphone became popularized. And it's also when the first social media for smartphone came out. That's Instagram. It's still one of the most popular social media today. I've been working with families for 15 years, and I've heard things that you cannot imagine. Child suicide attempts from very good families, the most perverse addictions, incest with little children because of things that they're imitating from what they've seen on screens. This is the biggest challenge facing everyone today, especially young people. It's not an exaggeration. I'm not being dramatic. We need to address this problem. Let's start with the biggest threat, which is pornography exposure. Again, it happens at a very young age. usually not intentionally. It can be through exposure through a friend or someone in the neighborhood, someone older, an older sibling. Oftentimes it's through curiosity, especially with boys. They're running on the bus and someone turns to them and says, hey, check this out. Have you seen this? And then they have these images seared in their brain that they will never forget. I know they'll never forget it because I work with people in their 30s and 40s who tell me, I remember the very first time I was exposed when I had a sleepover at my friend's house. Oftentimes it's through advertising on the internet, where these advertisers, marketers, they leave a kind of like a breadcrumb trail of immodest ads. You're going on a sports website, you're checking out cool cars, and you see an immodestly dressed woman. They know how to sell things. And then there's an ad on the side, and you click on that, and that leads to another thing and another thing. You're scrolling on Google Images. You keep scrolling down, and you see worse and worse pictures. You're on YouTube, and you see these weird suggestions. The thumbnails, people know how to get you to click on something. It starts with curiosity, but once you get in there, it's very difficult for a teenage boy to break out of that. They're going intentionally now at this point, and then they notice that they need to go. Otherwise, they feel depressed. They go multiple times a week, sometimes every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And now they're 20 years old, 30 years old, and it's an addiction because they know that it's too much and they want to stop. And even their friends are telling them it's too much. But at this point, they physically are not able to break out of it. Why are they unable to break out of it? Why is this a physiological addiction? One thing to understand here is that in 1 hour, a teenage boy can experience more explicit content than someone 100 years ago could in their entire lifetime. You're seeing things that people never saw in their entire lives. The way that these videos are scripted, I don't want to give too many details because it's very dark. But probably most people who are watching this video know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is an unnatural level of pleasure that's being released in the body. The pleasure molecule is dopamine. It's supposed to be a certain balance. You don't want it to be too low, you get depressed. You don't want it to be too high either, because what happens if you have consistently elevated levels of dopamine? The brain goes to homeostasis. It wants to have balance. The way it gets that balance is it starts destroying the dopamine receptors. Even when the dopamine molecules are released, the receptor shuts down so that the molecule can't even be absorbed into the receptor. So you have all this dopamine now flooding the brain, which doesn't do anything anymore because the receptors can't even receive it. Why is that a problem? One is the person doesn't experience now the same high that they used to. So now they're seeking more and more of the same substance. They're watching longer videos or more extreme videos, getting into more perverse content, or mixing it with other emotions like disgust and things like this, which are very weird. So they need more to get the same feeling. But really the bigger problem most people don't realize is because those dopamine receptors are shutting down, in the day-to-day life, the person is unable to experience a normal level of happiness and satisfaction and joy in life. So things that used to make them happy, like going outside, playing with their dog, hanging out with friends, spending time with family, reading a book, even just that feeling of job well done once you accomplish a task, those are no longer as pleasurable. So the person feels basically this low level of depression, and they start to only feel normal when they are getting into the addiction. That's why they're turning to it over and over again, more and more over time. And this is not something that you just grow out of naturally, because it's a physiological dependence. Yeah, it may start when the kid's in middle school. It gets worse when they're a teen. It continues in their young adult life. It continues in their married life. You have people, grown men, 50, 60 years old, happily married, they have kids, and they have this addiction on the side. If the wife knows about it, it really disturbs her because she sees it as if he's cheating on her, which is why it's one of the leading causes of divorce. So these are the 4 scenarios I see play out when it comes to this addiction. The first is the early intervention. This is very rare because parents don't pick up on it right away, because the child it's bringing so much shame, the child wants to hide it, of course. But if the parent can intervene early because they catch the child in the act, or the child is at such an innocent age that he comes clean, or maybe it was this accidental exposure. Like I talked to a parent of a young girl, neighborhood boy, showed her pornography. She wasn't seeking it out at all. She didn't want it. She found very disturbing action. So she turns to parents. At that point, it's a lot easy to, okay, let's just go cold turkey. Let's cut it out. We're going to protect your digital environment. And that's the best case scenario. More common scenario 2 is the slow reveal. So this is where the exposure starts again in middle school, continues for a few years, the kid's in high school, and then the parents find out maybe he comes clean. So sometimes through mentoring, if you have a really good relationship, you can encourage the child to, hey, come clean with your parents about this so you can get help for this. It takes a lot of courage. It's very, very difficult for young people to face their mom and dad because they have no idea how their parents are going to react. And oftentimes they react really badly, a supportive way. At least we've caught it somewhat early. We can get help. You can get professional help even. And also at this point, the parents can support the child because the parents control so much of the child's environment. So this is not the worst case scenario either. Scenario 3 is the crisis moment. Not the most common, thankfully, but it does happen. This is where it gets to such a point that the child realizes, I need to get out of here, but I don't know how, and they contemplate suicide. Kids from very good families who are looking at the parking garage from the 3rd floor thinking, I could jump off this right now. This would solve all my problems, they think. This is when I get phone calls to help to work with these families. And these are very good families as well. You never want your kid to reach this point. If you follow the steps which I'm going to give you towards the end of this video, you will be able to avoid it. Scenario 4, the long-term addict, probably the most common scenario. Starts the same way, early exposure, but continues through teens and then continues to the 20s, 30s, 40s. Who knows when it's going to stop? The average age of pornography consumption is 35 years old. So keep in mind that average means you got about half the people below, half the people above. If you're looking at 35 as the average, you have people in their 60s who are using pornography as well. The reason that this one doesn't stop is because the person never really hits that rock bottom. They never hit that crisis point. So they're functioning pretty good on the outside. On the superficial level, their job's going well. They have friends. Maybe they have a family. Maybe they have a wife. Maybe she's a beautiful woman. And they have kids. Maybe they go to daily mass even, and they're praying regularly. And they even opened up about this in confession or with their friends. They might even be in a group trying to get help. But it's just this kind of lukewarm status that doesn't really change, and it really breaks their self-esteem. There's a lot of shame. They feel like, I'm broken. I cannot get out of this because I've tried for so many years, so there's no way that I can get out of this. They lose hope. They get disillusioned with life, and they lose the vision of the greatness that God's calling them to. And I want to tell these people that there is hope. You can break out of it. You really can. I've seen it happen, and you can do it too. What keeps families trapped is the shame cycle. The child is ashamed. The parents are embarrassed. You can't freak out when you hear your child come to you about this. You have to be very receptive, open, and encouraging them that there's hope and that you will help them, because this affects so many people. I gave a talk in another city to a group of high schoolers, and I asked them, how many of your friends do you think are addicted to pornography? And more or less than 50%, more than 50, more or less than 60, more than 60, more than 70, more than 80. We got up to, in their estimation, 85% of their friends are addicted to pornography. Now, when I asked them, what is the biggest challenge facing young people? They mentioned everything except pornography. I had to say, you guys haven't mentioned pornography. That's obviously the biggest one. And then they all started nodding. And these are very, very good boys from very good families. So if their perception is 85%, probably the real statistic is much higher because they're not a representative sample. My point here is this faces a lot of people. So if your child is not alone, you're not alone either. We can get help. So what works for prevention? Having conversations with your child starting at the youngest age. This is not one conversation. This is not the one sex talk. This is multiple conversations starting with a child maybe 2-3 years old. How do you do that? Well, yeah, good question. You're going to obviously tailor it to the child, starting with very, very simple explanations of the plan for human love that God created us with. There's an excellent little book that's called Tips for Talking to Your Kid About Sex that goes through these different age groups and what you say at different age groups. One of their phrases that they like to say is, it's better to arrive a year too early than 5 minutes too late. So we live in a hypersexualized culture. Chances of you scandalizing your children compared to what they're going to hear in the lunchroom or on the bus from someone sitting next to them, it is very small. So you need to be having these conversations. There's another great book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, which is a picture book for children that you can read with your child, which tells them how to react when they see a bad picture, when they see pornography. Because again, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So we need to have a plan that you explicitly coach your child in how are you going to react when you have that first pornography exposure. This is creating them to be anti-fragile. We got to be proactive, not just reactive in this struggle, because the devil's trying to cram this down in our throat. When you're working with children, I would treat unrestricted internet access like a deadly weapon, like a loaded gun. Really, a loaded gun. Your child can use a loaded gun. That's no problem. I live in Texas. Kids go shooting all the time. Just heard a story about a kid, a 9-year-old kid who shot his first deer. That's great. But the point is, you wouldn't just give him unrestricted access to a loaded gun. You have a lot of supervision, and you help him with that. That's how I would treat the internet. There's got to be some protections in place, and there's got to be a lot of common sense with when and how you use it and what you use it for. We're not just surfing the web aimlessly. That's like trying to walk through a dangerous neighborhood just for fun, which I actually enjoy doing, by the way. But I wouldn't recommend it for little kids. The gateway and the accelerants to the addiction are social media. So social media is harmful on its own, but it's even more harmful because it leads to the pornography use. Oftentimes, when people are already addicted, they go through this little like ritual of what they do before they look at pornography. And it usually starts with getting out my phone and doom scrolling social media. And they know in the back of their mind that I know where this is going to end, but it kind of gives them permission to start the cycle. Because on social media, in a matter of minutes, you go from checking your own notifications to looking at pictures of attractive women to getting into pornography. Because your body's not going to want to stop at just those pictures. It's going to want to get more. And of course, with girls, there's also the social comparison and comparing their appearance, and it's not a real appearance. It's all tailored and airbrushed and all that. It lowers their self-esteem, which is why actually there's a bidirectional relationship. That means a two-way relationship between social media use and loneliness. The more social media is used, the lonelier the person actually feels. And then the lonelier they feel, the more they go to the social media to provide that comfort and support, which it will not give them. So that's a classic vicious cycle. Video games are the second accelerant. The thing with video games is it gets the kid accustomed to comfort seeking and wanting to avoid difficult things. Well, guess what is the best way to seek comfort by avoiding difficult things? Is pornography. That's the height of that. And video games is like training your soul for that. Even if the video game is not evil in itself, which oftentimes it is, the second largest selling video game franchise is Grand Theft Auto, which includes you as a character can hire prostitutes. He teaches you how to traffic drugs. And there's terrible language. There's one clip where they're dropping that bomb every 10 seconds. You're massacring cops. You're beating strangers. It's literally training you how to be an underworld drug lord. Why would children be doing that? Why would we want our children being exposed to that? Second most popular video game franchise in the world. Anyways, but even the video games that are not intrinsically evil, the environment it surrounds them with, the way that people speak when they're anonymous behind the screen in these like very high cortisol modes of playing the video game, it's a horrible environment. Just look at the eyes of your child when he's playing a video game. Listen to what he's listening to. Listen to what the people, oftentimes strangers, sometimes his friends, are saying. It's easy for parents to say, oh, he's socializing, he's with his friends. This is not a healthy form of socializing or spending time. Keep in mind, we have thousands of behavioral psychologists working to make social media, video games, and the smartphone itself, and these apps, all the visual cues, making it as addictive as possible. And they're very effective at doing it, which is why the tech CEOs are not sending their kids to high-tech schools. They're sending them to low-tech schools, the Waldorf schools in Silicon Valley, which are actually pretty interesting, shown to be pretty effective. So this is how the cycle works. The kid has the smartphone, the kid has the tablet. It always starts innocent, right? So he's checking tags, he's watching funny YouTube videos, funny cat videos. But again, you see your ad, and then you're curious. Your parents have never talked to you about this. Let me click on it. Oh my gosh, what is this? And they're experiencing all these physiological changes, which they haven't experienced before. Pretty soon, they're actively seeking it out. And when they're not on the pornography, they're looking at related things like immodest pictures on social media or training themselves for low-level entertainment on video games. They lose all interest in things that are actually important but are difficult, like real-life friendships face-to-face and working hard and finding fulfillment in doing it, having a job well done, spending time with the family, volunteering. You have two choices ahead of you. You can choose death. You can follow the culture. You can do what everyone else is doing. If everyone else is doing it, it can't be that bad, right? You can do what is easy. You can do what is convenient. You can do what is pleasant. Don't think too much about your decisions or your children's long-term futures. Or you can choose life. You can be countercultural. You can do what is right even when it's difficult. You can do what is noble even when you're the only one doing it. Your kids will love you for it. They will thank you for it. They will respect you both now and later for it. And you will get the ultimate compliment any parent can receive, which is when they have their own kids. I want to raise my kids just like you raised me, mom and dad. Parents think technology is a complicated topic, but it's not. It's very simple. I'm going to give you a very simple solution. Never give your kids a smartphone, ever. It's that simple. It will save you so much trouble, so many headaches. Parents make it complicated, make it difficult on themselves by bargaining, by giving incentives, by saying, if you do this, then maybe you can have a smartphone. Just leaving that option open rather than having a firm, calm, confident no with clarity and conviction that once your kids pick up on, they will no longer feel the need to argue it because they know that you're not going to change your mind. That's the solution. That's how to break out of this trap. Give your children the gift of a childhood, the gift that they can only receive once in their life and they can't get again. I want to throw out one warning about so-called dumb phones. So the problem now these days is many dumb phones are actually smartphones in disguise. They do have internet access and they don't have the ability to restrict access like smartphones do because they have all the parental controls and so forth. So in fact, dumb phones can be more dangerous than smartphones. I know someone who is actually addicted to pornography on the dumb phone precisely for these reasons. When you say no to the smartphone, you're saying yes to other activities. This approach isn't about just restricting them from things. We also want to develop and introduce positive activities. So free play, unsupervised free play outside with their peers without adult supervision, letting them be kids, letting them get dirty, letting them get scratched up, having tons of books in the house that they can pick up whenever they want. If they're bored, if they have nothing to do, if they don't have technology as an outlet, they are going to naturally pick up a book and read. Having, hands-on toys, hobbies, Legos, arts and crafts, things that they can play with, giving them exposure to nature, giving them real life responsibility so that they can develop themselves as a person and develop those skills. That means chores, cooking, cleaning, taking care of their younger siblings, giving your children the opportunity to have face-to-face interactions with their peers. Yeah, maybe messier around the house and maybe louder. Maybe your fridge is going to be emptier than you expected it to be. But these are the positive things that develop them as a person and will make the technology struggles irrelevant because they'll be happier. I want to directly address the top 3 challenges that prevent parents from doing what they know is right. I used to think that parents just didn't have the resources, they didn't have the knowledge. I've come to realize from working with parents and giving this talk many times that that's in fact not the issue. The issue is, first of all, anxious moms. Anxious moms, they want to watch their kid at all times, know where their child is at all times, track the physical location. Basically are pressured by their kids. They don't want their kid to think that they are bad or mean, or they don't want their kid not to like them. So they get into the phone as a way of appeasing the kid. So that's the kid likes them. The problem is this doesn't solve the problem. It just begins the problem. What moms don't realize, it's typically the mom. It doesn't have to be the mom. It could be the dad as well, but it's typically the mom. They're underestimating the digital dangers and vastly overestimating the physical dangers. The physical dangers in our modern society, if you live in the US, are surprisingly low, actually. We don't get that sense because we're biased by what we look at the news. But again, the news is not representative of day-to-day life for most people. So for example, if you wanted your child to be kidnapped, you'd have to wait until he was 700,000 years old. That's how likely it is to be kidnapped. It's more likely to be struck by lightning or to be born as a conjoined twin than to be kidnapped. I don't know how many of you watching this have been struck by lightning or even know someone who has been struck by lightning. So these things are in fact very rare. Whereas the digital dangers are very common. There's that FBI reports 500,000 predators online. So it's much more likely that a child is going to be experience mental illness, even commit suicide, be propositioned by an older man, those things are much more likely than experiencing any sort of physical harm from just playing outside and being a normal kid. The alternative to the anxious mom is the resilient matriarch. By the way, I specialize in anxiety. I understand that moms are anxious, and I love them and I support them and I help them in my clinic. I don't blame them actually for this, but it is important to recognize that that's the situation. And if you need help, seek help for it and become that resilient matriarch, that Mulier Fortis, the strong woman that Proverbs describes, this intergenerational figure of support, someone that your grandkids can look upon and respect and be the strong support for the family for generations. You can do that. And it's not about not feeling anxiety, actually. It's not the absence of anxiety. It's the willingness to experience it and still do what you know is right in your heart for your kid, regardless of what he or she thinks or says. And that's what they will respect you for. The reason I don't blame the mothers is because mom's not the head of the house. The dad is. If the dad were strong, then the anxious moms would not be a problem. So the bigger problem really is weak fathers, unfortunately. This is how I see it play out in my clinic. I'm working with the whole family. I have the son, the parents there, and I'm explaining just the science that we know of how these devices impact the child's brain. And the child looks really distraught because he sees the music, he hears the music and thinks that he's not going to get his video games as he wanted to. And the mom looks super concerned. Oftentimes she starts tearing up and crying. And the dad is nodding along saying, yes, I told you this. I knew this would happen. Why didn't you listen to me? So this is where I turn to the dad and say, look, man, you're the head of the house. It's your job to do what is right. It's your job to be the protector of the family and the strong support of the family. How can you let your family do what you know is harmful for them? How can you support that and go along with that? So if the mom is anxious, that's okay, as long as we have a strong father. And guess what? If you have a strong father, that mom is not going to feel as anxious because she's going to feel supported. So what's happening these days, unfortunately, is the whole family unit is being run by the emotions of a teenage girl, because the child's emotions are ruling her, and then she's in turn ruling the mother, and then the mother is ruling the father. Whereas we can just stop this whole process by having a strong father. That's what I would challenge you guys listening to this, that it's worth it. You know what is right. It's your job to be the parent. It's your job to do what is right and take back that God-given authority that you have. I know that men have lost their place in society and culture and the family. Just watch any popular TV show or movie. How often do they portray a strong, confident man who's good? It's very rare. That position has been stripped from men within society. We need to win that back, and you can win that back starting here with this battle. The third major challenge is social isolation, feeling alone, feeling like you're the only one in this battle. You're not. There are very good people out there fighting this battle side by side along you every single day. It's about finding them, discovering them, befriending them, and supporting one another in this challenge, because it is very difficult to do it alone. Because peer pressure is a real thing. It's not just for kids. Parents, adults face it too. They see that all the other adults are addicted to their phones and are giving their kids whatever they're asking for. So why am I going to be different? Why I don't want them to look at me differently or think that I think I'm better than them. This is where it's helpful to have peers that agree with you. So what I recommend is find one person, find one good family, one couple, one friend of yours and a friend of your child's, therefore, that you can spend time with without these digital distractions, and share that vision and even explicitly say, hey, this is what we're looking for. Can you support us with this? As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. It's really helpful to have that community. You can look online for those for different resources for that too. There's Aaron Lechner has the Opt Out Family, which teaches you how to facilitate these different communities. Screen Strong for Melanie Hamby. I've interviewed both these founders. She also has a network you can get in touch with, find people locally in your area. If you don't have people that you're aware of, build it. Build the community yourself. Be a leader in your community. So many people are suffering. Start with your child's school. You can bring in a speaker into their school or to the church and just explain how important this is for you. And let's help other families who, if we go to heaven either together or not at all. So let's help each other in this struggle. Every time I give this talk, I get so many questions. I could easily spend an hour and a half just answering questions. So that's what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to answer your most popular objections right now. I'm just going to read them off here. How can I ask my kids to practice temperance when I don't practice it myself? So the first thing I would have you recognize here is it good for them to practice temperance? If so, then you need to encourage and foster that regardless of your own behavior. Think about an alcoholic dad. Is he going to use his alcoholism as an excuse to start handing out whiskey shots to his 6-year-old son and his friends? No, it's like, yeah, he should be getting his stuff together. He should be taking care of that addiction he has, but not wait for him to get that under control before he helps his kids with that. Yeah, it is true that parents should be giving good example and they should be practicing digital temperance themselves, but let's not use that as an excuse to let our kids fall into addiction. Second objection, my kids will just get a burner phone if I don't let them get a smartphone. What I would say about this is, if you're at the level where your kids are just going to flout your authority to that degree, then you have a much bigger problem than the digital problem. So there's something that went wrong earlier on that we need to address. But the other thing I would say about this is, even if they do get a burner phone from a friend, which some people do, I've worked with families who have, well, guess what? You didn't provide them that. It's kind of like saying, well, I'm not going to let my kids smoke weed, but they'll just get weed from a friend. Okay, they might. They have the freedom to do that. It's pretty easy to do. They could do that. But does that make it right for you to give them weed in order to, I don't know, why would you, if it's not right for them to be doing it, why would you provide it to begin with? What if they need to reach me for safety? Again, these physical dangers are vastly exaggerated. We live in a helicopter generation, largely because of contraception. People are only having 1 or 2 kids, so they're just terrified. They don't have anything else to think about than their 1 or 2 kids. Back when people had 8, 9, 10 kids, the family would just kind of run itself with the older kids being in charge, and you're not thinking about your one kid playing in a stream or running around in the woods. So I would say these dangers are greatly exaggerated. We lived without phones for all of human history up until 20 years ago. These are not essential devices. And guess what? Because everyone has a phone, your child can borrow a phone at any time. You may have to memorize a few numbers. Remember when we had phone numbers memorized? People don't do that anymore. Well, your child can memorize some numbers, can exercise some social skills and ask an adult, God forbid, or a peer to borrow their phone to make a call. By the way, when it comes to physical dangers, I would point out that the leading cause of death for young people is accidents. Well, and the leading cause of those accidents is car accidents, motor vehicle accidents. Well, do you think the smartphone in their hands is making them safer or less safe when they're driving a car? So in fact, phones, I believe, contribute to more physical deaths than not having phones. Because then you have to also look at, well, the second leading cause of death for young people is suicide. And we already know that this toxic screen use contributes to that through depression and loneliness. We shouldn't run from the world. Phones are normal now, so we should just incorporate them into our daily life and teach them how to use it well. To this objection, I would say, first of all, should phones be normal? Because guess what else is normal? Contraception is normal. Abortion is normal. Pornography is normal. Dressing like a woman of ill repute when you're exercising or even just walking down the street or even going to a job interview, that is normal these days. Are those things good? That's the first question we should be asking. Is it good? Normal doesn't mean good. So if it's not good, we shouldn't do it no matter how normal it is, recognizing that we live in an evil empire like the Hebrew people did of old in Babylon or Persia or Canaan or what have you. So that's the first question to ask. Should it be normal? And if it shouldn't be normal, then let's get rid of it. I need to teach them how to use this well while they're young. What teaches kids to use technology well, or really any potentially addictive device or substance well, is not using the thing, but virtue. Virtue is what helps them to moderate their desires and their desire for pleasure and their ability to do difficult things when it's good. So the question to ask is, what is going to help them grow in virtue? Is the smartphone going to help them grow in virtue? Is social media going to help them grow in virtue? Are video games going to help them grow in virtue? And I think the answer to all of these is no way. It's going to make the struggle so much harder. If most adults are addicted to their screens, which they are, just look around you when you go anywhere. How do you expect a child to be able to moderate their desire for this highly addictive device when a grown adult cannot do it? And the adults were protected from smartphones for their entire childhood and often not most of their adulthood. Whereas the kids are being exposed to it at a young age. It's inside them so much earlier. Smartphones do not build virtue; they inhibit it. And you don't teach your child to use a smartphone well by giving it to them at a young age when they're not prepared for it. They'll be socially isolated without social media. First thing I would point out is that social media is not social; it's antisocial. It does not teach healthy forms of communication. If you doubt that, just look at your child's interactions on social media. Just you can create your own account. Well, probably you already have one, and just look at how young people talk to each other. It's the veil of anonymity takes away that inhibition, and they say the most absurd things that they would never say face to face, and they can't say face to face because they're terrified of in-person interactions. If you notice, if social media is so social, how come children these days are so bad at in-person social interactions, at looking you in the eye, at giving you a firm handshake, at giving you a smile, doing small talk, asking you how you're doing? So social media is not social. And if the child relies on that for what he perceives is a social life, then he doesn't have a social life. And he really needs help developing social skills through in person interactions. I'm speaking to you today because I believe your sons and your daughters can grow up to be good men and women. I believe they can be the children of God, the saints that God had in his mind from the beginning and is calling them to. The prophet Joel says, in the last days, I will teach your sons and daughters to prophesy. They can prophesy. They can speak truth. They can be beacons of light and goodness in this world that's so full of darkness. They can be the ones to guide their friends, their peers to break out of these addictions that so many people are experiencing. They can be the emotionally stable one that their other friends turn to as a solid rock when they're too afraid to turn to even their own parents. They can do that. But in order to do that, they will have had to be protected from these harmful influences from a young age and to develop their character through doing difficult things through their life and through just living a normal life as God intended us to live. You have an essential role as their mother or father in this development. You can give them that opportunity to be an extraordinary young man or woman, even better than you and I are today, because they're facing so many temptations that we didn't face growing up. They have the potential either for great ruin or for great holiness. But their ability to respond to that is going to depend on your decisions starting today. If you found this helpful, subscribe to this channel. I'm releasing new videos every week. I love to hear your comments and I respond to your comments. I also love speaking on this topic. If your group or organization needs help, contact me. I'll speak to your organization. You can do this. Stay strong. I'll see you in the next video.